Let us discuss in this chapter about life process. So, in our day-to-day life, we must have all observed various life processes happening in the environment. For instance, the flowering of plants, birds moving, and even we ourselves do a lot of activities. So, does that all amount to life process? Definitely not. There are certain processes which are very much necessary for us to live. These processes are called life processes. So, life processes, to define briefly, are those processes without which we will not be able to live on this planet. So, there are many life processes, but for the purpose of our study, our textbook has classified it into 4. The first is nutrition, then respiration, transportation, and excretion. So, these are 4 life processes which we will be studying in this chapter. All the life processes are interconnected. When I say this, it means that all processes happen as a network. It does not happen as a stand-alone or isolated. So, these processes are connected, and we will understand at the end of this chapter how these processes are connected. So, the first process we are going to study is the nutrition. Nutrition, by definition, is the process by which an organism takes its food and utilizes it. Broadly, the nutrition can be classified into autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. Heterotrophic nutrition can again be classified as saprophytic, parasitic, and holozoic nutrition.
Autotrophic nutrition. The term auto means self. Autotrophic nutrition is a process in which the organism derives its nutrition on its own. The best example for autotrophic nutrition is green plant. Green plants and certain type of bacteria have the ability to prepare food on its own. Now, how this happens? In your previous classes, you might have studied about the cell and its structures. So, in plants, there is an organelle called chloroplast, and this chloroplast contains a green pigment called the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll absorbs photosynthetically active radiation from the sun, and along with that, it uses water and carbon dioxide to synthesize glucose, or the food that is required for plants for its survival. Now, how this happens? See, if you take a cross section of a leaf, you can see in the lower epidermis part of the leaf there is an opening which is guarded by kidney shaped or bean shaped cells. These cells are called guard cells, and the opening is called the stomata. The stomata has two important functions. It facilitates the process of photosynthesis and transpiration. Now, what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the process by which plant utilizes the solar energy or the solar radiation and prepares its food. See, it not only requires solar radiation, but also it needs carbon dioxide and water for the process. So, this entire mode of nutrition is termed as autotrophic nutrition, and the process involved in autotrophic nutrition is the photosynthesis, which is mainly happening in plants. Saprophytic nutrition. Now, what are saprophytes? Saprophytes are living organisms that feed on dead and decaying organisms. They are considered extremely important for the soil biology. They break down the complex organic matter into simpler substances that are taken up by plants for various metabolic activity. So, saprophytes play a very important role in our ecosystem. Now, in saprophytic mode of nutrition, they undergo extracellular digestion. So, here what happens is these saprophytes secrete digestive substances or digestive juices, you can say, into the surrounding environment and break down the organic matter into simpler substances. The nutrients thus produced are absorbed directly through the cell membranes of the organism. Now, the best example for saprophytic nutrition is fungi, or you can say the bread mold or the yeast. A parasitic mode of nutrition. This type of nutrition must be familiar to all of us, because for sure we must or we might all have been bitten by the mosquito at some point of time. Here, the relationship is called host parasite relation. So, it is a heterotrophic nutrition in which an organism lives on the surface of the body or inside the body of another organism. So, here we can say the mosquito, it sucks the human blood. So, mosquito is the parasite and it feeds on us. So, we are the host that provide nutrition for the mosquito. So, in parasitic mode of nutrition, the parasite derives its nourishment from the host. This relation or this interaction is mostly harmful to the host. We all know that there are many diseases caused by the mosquito. For example, malaria, even filaria, all those are caused by the mosquito. So this relation is often harmful to the host or the organism in which the parasite lives. Now, parasites are dependent on their host for their survival, but hosts do not require any benefit. The hosts do not have any benefit from the parasite. So it is kind of one way benefit relation. The parasite gets its nutrition, but for the host it is more or less harmful in many occasions. So that is about parasitic mode of nutrition. The nutrition in amoeba. Nutrition in an amoeba occurs through a process called phagocytosis, where the entire organism engulfs the food that it wants to eat. The mode of nutrition, as I said, is called holozoic nutrition. Now, amoeba does not have any specialized organ for nutrition. The entire process is carried out through the body surface with the help of pseudopodia. Now let us see how the holozoic nutrition in amoeba take place. The first step is ingestion. Ingestion is a process of taking the food into the body either by swallowing or by absorbing it. Amoeba pushes out the pseudopodia to encircle the food and engulfs it, forming a vacuole. This process is known as phagocytosis. Now, the next step is digestion. Digestion is the process of breaking the insoluble and the large food molecules into soluble and even smaller molecules. In amoeba, the food vacuoles are transported deeper into the cell, and with the help of digestive enzymes, the larger insoluble food particles are broken down into simplest molecule. Now, next step is absorption. In this process of absorption, the nutrients from the undigested food material in this process, the nutrients from the digested food material are absorbed into the cell cytoplasm by leaving behind the undigested particles. This process is called diffusion. The excess of food is stored in the form of glycogen and lipids. Now, the next step is assimilation. Assimilation is a process of obtaining energy from the absorbed food molecules. In amoeba, absorbed food molecules are utilized for producing energy required to carry out the life processes within the single cell. Now, the last and final step in Holozoic nutrition is egestion. Egestion is a process of excretion of undigested food particles. In amoeba, this process is carried out by rupturing the cell membrane to remove the undigested material from its body. So, this is about Holozoic nutrition. In Holozoic nutrition, it involves basically those 5 steps which you need to remember. That is, the first one is taking in of the food or the ingestion, and then breaking down the food into further simpler molecules by the process of digestion. And after digestion, there are various mechanisms to absorb the food materials that is being digested. So it differs from organism to organism. In amoeba, being a single celled organism, the process is pretty much simpler, but in the complex or the higher order organism, as in case of human beings, which we will be studying in detail, so there are certain mechanisms to absorb food as well. So after the process of absorption, then there is assimilation, or utilizing the absorbed food particles to get its energy or to produce the ATP molecules which gives energy. Or so this, there are various other life process also happening. Now after the assimilation, there will of course be undigested food materials which need to be thrown out of the body. So that happens through the process called egestion. So in the process of digestion, we have egestion. So just you need to remember that the undigested materials are egested, not excreted. Excretion has something to do with your kidneys. So in your digestive system, you use the word egestion. So that is about the Holozoic mode of nutrition.
Human digestive system. Human digestive system comprise a group of organisms which work together to convert the food into energy inside our body. So, if you speak anatomically, the digestive system is a long tract. It is called the gastrointestinal tract, or in the locally it is called as the gut, or you say the alimentary canal. So these are the different names for the digestive system. So there are various organs. It begins with an opening called the mouth. Then you have a common region for your air and food, which is called as the pharynx. After the pharynx, the food enters food pipe or the esophagus, then to the stomach, from the stomach to the small intestine, and subsequently to the large intestine, and then the food is collected in the large intestine, and then it is, after all the nutrients are absorbed, then the remaining waste is stored temporarily in the rectum and finally ingested into the anus. So let us see how it happens. So in the buccal cavity, you have mouth, tongue and also salivary glands. So these salivary glands are duct, and through these ducts they pour the saliva into your mouth. So the saliva contains an important enzyme called salivary amylase. So these salivary amylase helps in the digestion of starch. So by starch it means a long chain of sugar. So this long chain of sugar is converted into short chains. Okay, this is what happens inside the mouth. Then the food comes to the pharynx, nothing happens in the pharynx, and then to the food pipe or esophagus. So in the esophagus, there is a movement of food happening. So that mechanical movement of food happening from the mouth to along your entire digestive system is called peristalsis. So that is the mechanical movement. In the buccal cavity or in the mouth, we told about the chemical process taking place. So digestion in human is a combination of both chemical and mechanical process. So in the stomach, after the esophagus, the food enters the stomach. So inside the stomach, there are three important secretions. First is the hydrochloric acid, then it is the pepsin, and then it is the mucus. So these are secreted by certain glands called gastric glands present inside the stomach. So the action of HCl is there is an enzyme called pepsin, which is also secreted by the gastric gland. The pepsin is a very lazy kind of person, so the pepsin cannot act on its own. The pepsin needs to be activated. So this process of activation is done by hydrochloric acid. So that is the function of hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid activates the pepsin. Now, what does the pepsin do? The pepsin breaks down the proteins in your food into smaller molecules. So, in the previous classes, you must have studied about the nutrients. The nutrients basically consist of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins and minerals. So, inside the stomach, the digestion of protein is taking place and the mucus is secreted mainly to protect our gastric glands or the lining of our entire alimentary canal. Right. So after the stomach, the food reaches the small intestine. In the small intestine, a lot of processes happen. There are two important organs. One is the liver and the other is the pancreas. These two pour their secretion into the small intestine. So what does liver do? Liver produces an enzyme called bile and it stores the bile in a temporary pouch called the gallbladder. You can see that in the image. So the liver secretes bile and then stores it in the gallbladder and then through a duct it pours into the small intestine. Now the pancreas also secretes some enzymes like trypsin. So these enzymes are also poured into the small intestine. Now let us understand what is the function of bile. Bile emulsifies. Understand the term emulsifies the fat. So what does emulsification means? Emulsification means it is an action just like the soap does. So when your hands are very oily, the normal washing will not help you. You will have to wash with a soap or something similar like a hand wash in order to make your hands very clean. So that is what happens inside your small intestine also. The bile will emulsify the longer fat molecules into shorter ones. Now the pancreas also secretes lipases and trypsin. So the trypsin will help in the digestion of protein and lipases will also help in the digestion of fat. So this is what happens in the small intestine. Now in the small intestine there are tiny projections on the inner surface. So what are these called? These are called villi. Now, what is this function of villi? In the beginning, I have said that all life processes are interconnected. So, it is through this villi, there are numerous capillaries or the blood vessels, and your food which are digested and are absorbed by these capillaries. This is the link between your digestive system and your circulatory system. So, villi also helps to increase the surface area. So, when you increase the surface area, there is more digestion, more absorption happening. So, that is the function of microvilli. Now, on coming to the large intestine, there is nothing significant happening here. Almost all your digestion is complete in the small intestine. So, in the large intestine, the water and also some electrolytes are absorbed, and then the fecal matter is formed in the large intestine, and then it is stored temporarily in the rectum, and then finally digested through the anus. So this is the gist of what is happening in the human digestive system. So in the first it begins with mouth, then through the pharynx, esophagus, and understand in the mouth there was the digestion of starch by salivary amylase, and inside the stomach there was an enzyme pepsin which helped in the digestion of protein, and coming on to small intestine also the digestive process is almost complete here, and then in the large intestine the absorption of water and electrolytes, and finally the waste matter is digested. Remember, in digestive system we use the word digestion, not excretion. So this is what is all about the digestive process. So the end products of digestion. So in the end of digestion, the carbohydrates are converted into glucose, and the proteins are converted into amino acids, and fats are converted into fatty acids and glycerol. So here is the link between the respiration and digestion. Alright, so in this we will take only the glucose molecules. There are many processes happening to the proteins and fats as well, but we are concerned only with the glucose molecule, and this is a link between your digestion and respiration. So now you have to picture this has happened in the tract called your gastrointestinal tract or your digestive system. Now you have to picturize a single cell. I said in the small intestine there are microvilli which absorbs the digested food, and the nutrients are absorbed. Now these are carried to the individual cell. Now come to the individual cell, what happens to this glucose molecule? So let us understand what happens to glucose molecules. So respiration, there is always a confusion between respiration and breathing. So please understand that respiration involves exchange of gases and oxidation of food to release energy, whereas breathing is a mechanical process by which you take air and you give out air. So breathing is a mechanical process, but respiration is more of a chemical process. Now how this respiration happens? It happens differently in different organisms. We are living in surrounded by an envelope of air called atmosphere. So from atmosphere we can directly get oxygen because atmosphere contains a sufficient amount of oxygen, but there are certain organisms which live in water like the fishes. So these organisms have to depend upon the dissolved oxygen in the water. So that is more stressful process. For us it is easy, much more easier when compared to the aquatic or those organisms which live in water. So what happens in respiration is different organisms do it in different pathways. So we will study mainly 3 pathways today. Now picturize that the glucose has reached in an individual cell. Now the cell has a cytoplasm and then a nucleus. Alright. So in the cell, that is specifically inside the cytoplasm, glucose is converted into pyruvate. Now glucose is a 6-carbon molecule and pyruvate is a 3-carbon molecule. So one glucose molecule will form 2 pyruvate molecule and it releases energy. Now the pyruvate has an option. It can go for different pathway. Now let us understand. First, in the organisms like yeast, in the absence of oxygen, these pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon molecule, get converted into ethanol. Ethanol is an alcohol which is a 2 carbon molecule, and 1 molecule of carbon dioxide is released, and also there is also some energy that is being released. Now you must have observed in the batter for the idli or dosha, you don't make it all on a sudden. You keep the batter for some time so that you get the most softened idlis. So what is happening there is this process, that is fermentation. So here what happens is the carbon dioxide is released, which makes it soft. So this happens in the absence of oxygen, and it is through this process of fermentation that we make certain beverages as well. Now the second choice for the pyruvate molecule is the formation of lactic acid, which usually happens in your muscle cells. See, when you do a lot of physical activity, for instance running or any other sort which involves lot of energy, your muscle cell will not get sufficient oxygen. So what happens in that situation is it converts the pyruvate molecule into lactic acid and release some amount of energy. Now coming on to the most important process, and which happens in almost most of the cells in the human body, that is the pyruvate is being converted into carbon dioxide and water, and energy is released. Now this process is happening inside mitochondria. You must have studied in your lower classes that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, because this oxidation process happens and energy is released. So these energy are released in the form of ATP molecules. Alright, so this ATP molecule is what gives energy to the cell to function properly. So these are the 3 important pathways where the pyruvate forms different molecules. So in a yeast it forms ethanol, inside your muscle cell it forms lactic acid, and inside the mitochondria in most other cells it releases carbon dioxide and water. So understand, in all these processes some amount of energy is released, but the most amount of energy you can find it in the process that happens in the mitochondria. So in the normal respiration this is what is happening. Now coming on to the human respiratory system. So human respiratory system consists of nostrils. Nostrils are the opening which you see. So through the nostrils the air enters, and there are, you must have seen, if you have ever observed or felt, there are hairs inside your nose. So what do these hairs do? They purify the air that enters in the nasal cavity, and now the air reaches in the pharynx. So in the digestive system also we said that pharynx is a common passage for both air and food. So then from the pharynx the food goes through larynx, which is your voice box, then through the trachea. Trachea is a ring shaped cartilage. So what is the function of trachea is that when there is no air inside your lungs, the trachea protects it from collapsing. So from the trachea it branches into bronchi and then into bronchioles, and finally it ends in a balloon like structure called the alveolar sacs. So this is the overall structure of the respiratory system. Now the process of breathing. So the mechanical process, breathing I said is a mechanical process. You take in air and you give out air. So this happens as a result of pressure differences inside your lung and also the air envelope that surrounds us. As I told, we are surrounded by an envelope of air called the atmosphere. So there is a difference between the pressure in the atmosphere and also inside the lungs. Remember, the pressure, it always goes from a high pressure to a lower pressure. So when there are certain organs which assist in respiration or the mechanical process of breathing. So in the respiration, mainly the diaphragm is there, the ribs are there. So the normal shape of diaphragm is dome shaped. So when you take in the air, the lungs expands and also your ribs are lifted, and what happens to the diaphragm is that it comes down or it flattens. So this is what happens when you take in air. So and when you exhale or when you give out, this all comes back to the normal. The diaphragm comes back to the original dome shape, and also your ribs and other muscles which involved also relaxes. Alright, so this is the process of breathing. Breathing is nothing but the mechanical process of taking in air and giving out air. Now the air you take finally enters inside the alveoli. So in the alveoli, the process of gas exchange take place. So this gas exchange mainly happens through the process of diffusion. So these alveoli are richly supplied with blood vessels. Again, this is a link between your respiratory system and your circulatory system. So the alveoli also increases the surface area, just like the villi in your digestive system. The alveoli helps in increasing the surface area of gas exchange. So in the alveoli, usually the diffusion happens, but in higher organisms, because of the structural complexity, when I mean structural complexity, in multicellular organs, there are various other factors also involved. So one such factor that helps in the gas exchange process is the hemoglobin content that is present inside your blood. So we will study more about hemoglobin in the circulatory system. So for this purpose, you understand that this hemoglobin has affinity to both oxygen as well as to carbon dioxide, and because of this the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide happens through blood, and also the exchange of gases take place between the blood vessels surrounding the alveoli and the capillaries. So this is the process of gas exchange taking place inside your lungs. Then coming on to the transportation in humans. So transportation is mainly done by the blood. So blood is a connective tissue. So blood helps in the circulation of oxygenated blood from the heart to various other organs. It also carries the deoxygenated blood and purifies it in the lungs. So the basic component of blood are the plasma and the cells. So plasma and the cells. So the cellular component of blood includes RBCs or red blood corpuscles, WBCs or white blood corpuscles, and platelets. Now if we talk about RBCs are also called erythrocytes. So RBCs contain the pigment called hemoglobin. So it is this pigment that binds with the oxygen as well as it can also bind with carbon dioxide, and it is through these RBCs that the oxygen reaches the individual cells and performs the various functions. Now WBC, they are basically the soldiers of your body. So when any foreign body enters your blood, it is these soldiers, that is the WBC, that fight against them. Now the third component of blood, that is the platelets. So platelets basically help in the clotting of blood. You might have observed when there is a wound on the surface of your body, anywhere on your body, after some time, even without you do anything, there must have been a mesh work of red colored components. So these are called clots. So how does it happen? It happens because of the platelets. So if platelets were not there, there would be bleeding, and bleeding would not stop even from a small wound, and that would ultimately even lead to death. So platelets helps in the process of clotting. WBCs are your soldiers and they help in the defense of the body, and then RBCs are help in the carrying the nutrients through the pigment hemoglobin. Now coming to the plasma component, plasma is actually a clear fluid. So these plasma contain certain proteins which also helps in the defense of the body. So you must have heard in the wake of COVID-19 that plasma therapy is done for patients. So in the COVID we take the plasma from the recovered patient and we give it to the patient who are suffering from the disease. So these plasma contain certain proteins which fight against the foreign bodies that enter inside your body. Now coming on to the other components of the transportation, the most important probably are the blood vessels. So when you talk about blood vessels, there are basically three, that is artery, vein and capillaries. So these arteries are the blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Remember, artery away from the heart to various other organs inside the body. So from the heart, the blood is pumped with such a high pressure that the walls of the arteries are thickened. Now, when you talk about veins, veins collect blood from different organs and bring it to the heart. So they do not need thick wall because the blood in the vein doesn't flow under high pressure. So the pressure is quite normal inside the vein. So you don't need valves for you don't need thick walls for the vein. Now there are valves also. Valves are present for the vein because there is a chance, because the pressure is low, there is a chance for blood to backflow. So what happens when the blood flows backwards? The oxygenated and the deoxygenated, that is the pure and the impure blood mixes. So in order to prevent the mixing of pure and impure blood, we have valves present in the vein. Now capillaries. Capillaries are blood vessels. They say they are single cell thickness. So these are very minute blood vessels. So the artery branches into arterioles and finally to the capillaries. And for any organ, it is actually the capillaries that supplies. So capillaries are the blood vessels that ultimately supply to a cell. So the capillaries are probably the smallest also. Now it forms an interconnected network, that is the arteries, arterioles and capillary, and also veins carry impure blood from organs, they form venules and also they join with the capillary. So it acts as a network. Now coming on to the other fluid, that is lymph. So what is lymph? See, in your artery, the blood, I said, is flowing with such a high pressure that there are chances that some part of the blood, when I say some part of the blood, it is mainly the plasma and also some amount of WBCs, they can come out of the artery. So these components of blood which has come out are taken by this lymph or the lymphatic system. Along with that, there are certain fluids present between your cells or between your tissues. So these lymph carry both these components which has come out of your artery as well as your interstitial fluid together and drains into the vein. So whenever you have an infection, your doctor must have looked for something on your neck, that is the lymph node. So these lymph nodes contain WBCs. So when you have an infection, the amount of WBC inside your lymph will be higher. So your lymph node will be enlarged. So the lymph finally collected in the lymphatic trunk and then empties into the veins. Now talking about the most important organ of your body, the heart. So heart is basically a muscular organ. So the heart is located between your lungs. Alright, between your lungs, slightly towards the left of your breastbone called sternum. So if you say the size, it is slightly larger than the fist. You can hold it in your fist. So it has 4 chambers, that is 2 atria or the auricles, and then 2 ventricles. So heart has a right auricle, right ventricle, left auricle and left ventricle. Now what is the function of heart? We will study in detail about the double circulation. It is the heart that supplies blood to different organs of the body and maintains the life. So double circulation. In double circulation, the impure blood from different parts of the body are carried by the veins. So from your lower part of the body, it is the vein called inferior vena cava, and from the upper part of your body, it is a vein called superior vena cava, which carries the blood to the right auricle or the right atria. So the impure blood reaches the right atria, and from the right atria or the right auricle, atria and auricle are the same. So from the right auricle that it contracts, when it contracts, the blood flows into the right ventricle. So the heart has valves. So there are basically 4 valves. In the right side you have a valve called tricuspid valve, and on the left side we have mitral valve. So no need to remember all that, but understand that there are valves to prevent the backflow of blood. That is, once the blood reaches the ventricle, this valve prevents the blood from flowing from the ventricle back to the atria. So the blood from the atria reaches the ventricle. So from the ventricle there is an artery called the pulmonary artery. Remember, anything related with pulmonary is connected to your lungs. So usually I said in the beginning that arteries carry oxygenated blood, but there is only one exception for that. That is the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery carries the blood from the right ventricle to your lungs. Alright, so remember, all the arteries carries oxygenated blood, but this artery called the pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated or the impure blood from your heart to the lungs. See, in the lungs is the process of purification taking place. So pulmonary artery carries impure blood, whereas all the other arteries carries oxygenated blood. So now the blood has reached the lungs, and from the lungs you have, through the process of breathing the air, pure oxygenated air is there inside your lungs, and the process of purification of this impure blood happens inside your lungs. So from the lungs there is a vein called pulmonary vein. So we said all the veins carry impure blood, but there is an exception for that too. This particular vein called the pulmonary vein that carries the blood, that is, now the blood is coming from the lungs. So remember, the purification has taken place inside the lungs. So whatever comes from the lungs are pure only. So these pure blood then goes to the left side of the heart or the left auricle. So the left auricle or the left atria contracts and then the blood flows into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, the blood is taken by a aorta. So this aorta is a very large artery. It branches into further smaller arteries. So we don't have to study all that, but just understand that this aorta carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to various other parts of the body. So this is called double circulation. Now why it is double circulation? Because the blood flows through your lungs twice and these happen simultaneously. That is, the blood from the right auricle goes to the right ventricle. Simultaneously the blood flows from the left auricle to the left ventricle. So these processes are happening at the same time. So there is two circuit happening. One is the pulmonary circuit and the other is the systemic circuit. Where does the pulmonary circuit happen? It happens the right side of your heart. Remember, from the right auricle to the right ventricle, then to the lungs. This is the pulmonary circuit. And from the left auricle to the left ventricle to the finally to different parts of the body. This is the systemic circuit. So this is the gist of double circulation happening in the heart. Now blood pressure, no need to study much in detail. It is the force that blood exerts against the wall of a vessel. So the normal blood pressure is 120/80. Just remember, for the sake of understanding, it is not so important. Now let us study about the transportation in plants. So in plants you have two specialized sets of tissue, that is the xylem and then the phloem. So the xylem is associated with the transport of water and phloem is associated with the transport of food. Okay, so now how does the water transport happens? See, there are cells near the root. So these cells, what it does is it absorbs lot of nutrients or mineral ions to say from the soil. So now the cells will have more concentration of ions. So because of these pressure differences, that is, there is higher concentration of mineral in the cells closer to the soil and there is lesser pressure in the soil. So because of this, the water moves up through a capillary action. So this is how the water is transported. Remember, the water transport happens only in one direction. That is, the xylem tissue will conduct only in one direction, that is from the root to upwards, not the other way. So water transportation in plants happen through a specialized tissue called xylem, and this xylem, how does it happen? Because of the pressure differences between the soil and those cells which are in the root of the plant. So because of this pressure, water rises above. Now the next is the food transport. So how is food transported? The food transported through the phloem. Okay, so the process of transportation of food or other soluble products, phloem not only transport food but it also transport some other materials like amino acids, etc. So this process of transport of soluble particles are called translocation. Now this is done by phloem. This also happens as a difference in the pressure between the cells. We don't have to study in detail about that, but this happens in bidirectional. I mean, from the xylem it happens only in one direction, that is from the root to the upwards. So the phloem, it happens in by two direction as well. That is the important difference which you have to understand with respect to xylem and phloem. So these are the cells, difference between xylem and phloem. You can understand that it is through the xylem mainly associated with the transport of water and minerals, whereas phloem is associated with the transport of food as well as amino acids and some other soluble materials. Now coming to the other life process, that is the excretion. So when I say about excretion, it is the elimination of your metabolic waste, that is excretion. What is meant by metabolic waste? A lot of process happen in your body. It is mainly associated with the nitrogenous waste. Understand, it is mainly associated with the nitrogenous waste, mainly the urea. We excrete urea. We the human beings excrete urea. So it is not only the kidneys that are involved in the process of excretion. There are various other organs. To say there is excretion happening through the pores on your skin. Then there is excretion happening in the liver also. Liver is the major detoxifying organ of the body. Then some amount of excretion happens through your lungs as well. So the major part of excretion is done by the kidneys. So human excretory system consists of a pair of kidney, a ureter and a urinary bladder, and finally a urethra through which the urine is excreted out. Now coming on to, just like we have studied in various other systems, there are fundamental units associated with each organ system. So in the kidney or in the renal system, another term is the renal. So in this we have a fundamental unit called nephrons. Don't get confused with neurons and nephrons. Neurons are associated with your nervous system and nephrons are associated with kidney. When you have any problems with kidney, for instance, the most common is kidney stones, you visit a nephrologist. So understand the difference between neuron and nephron. Now if we have to take a cross section of the fundamental unit called nephron, it consists of mainly two parts, that is the Bowman's capsule and also the tubular part of the nephron. Now in the picture we can see that there are arteries coming to the kidneys. So these kidneys, what they do is they eliminate the nitrogenous waste. So these glomerulus or this glomerular part of the nephron contains, glomerular is nothing but a tuft of capillaries, many capillaries surrounding the Bowman's capsule, that is called the glomerulus. So this what it does is it does the job what a filter does. So it filters your blood, and the urea component is excreted. So it involves mainly three processes. One is the filtration, then there is tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. That is how the urine is formed. We don't have to study in detail about it, but this is the structure. This is the structure of a nephron. Nephron has a Bowman's capsule. It is something like a capsule only which contains rich blood capillaries. The blood comes there, it gets filtered, and the part which involves the nitrogenous waste, it passes through the tubular part, and from the tubular part also some useful materials are there which must be absorbed by the capillaries present there, and from there it goes to the collecting part, the collecting duct, where the nitrogenous waste are collected, and then finally it joins with the ureter, and then it is excreted out through the opening called urethra. So this is how the urine is formed and how it is excreted out. Now hemodialysis or the artificial kidneys. So in patients with kidney failure, this is the usual process that is done. So what it does is, you have an artery which is very much superficial on your hand, and this artery on your hand is called the renal artery. So from this renal artery the surgeon will make a connection, and then from this the blood is taken out. So these blood contain nitrogenous waste because your kidney cannot work properly, so your blood has to be eliminated from the nitrogenous waste, otherwise it will lead to toxin, it will secrete toxins into your blood. So these nitrogenous waste has to be eliminated. So for that we take the blood, and what we do is, inside your blood the normal body temperature is there, which is 37 degrees Celsius. When you take the blood out, you make it at 0 degree. Why 0 degree? Because to inactivate or to prevent the activities of microbes, we make the blood at 0 degree and we add heparin. Heparin prevents the blood from clotting. So after that it goes through the tubes, and then there is a dialysing fluid. So this dialysing fluid has the same concentration as that of blood. So the blood, it passes through that, and then it eliminates all the nitrogenous waste, and then the blood is pumped back to the vein. So what happens is, before pumping the blood back, we have to make it at the normal body temperature, and also we have to add an anti-heparin. So because we added heparin to prevent the blood from clotting, now when you enter it back into the body, it has to be, these conditions need to be reversed. So this is what happens in hemodialysis. It does the function of a kidney in patients who has both kidney failure. When one kidney fails, the other kidney can take over the function of both. But if two kidneys have failed, then the option is either you have to take a new kidney from some other person, or if you cannot afford that, this is what is normally done. This is the process of hemodialysis or artificial kidney. Now coming on to excretion in plants. Plants also have waste products, and now how it is done? So it is done through transpiration. So this transpiration, it happens as a result of certain pressure inside the plant cell. So it is the stomata, as we have seen in case of photosynthesis also. It is the stomata that helps in the process. So the transpiration also happens through the opening called stomata. So it is through transpiration. You can see, if you have ever seen, you will have noticed that there are water droplets on the leaf, just like vapors. So this is what is called transpiration. So this happens with the help of stomata. Now there are certain other waste materials which are stored in the vacuole. So in the vacuole also plant stores in, and there are some excretion. What they do is they excrete it along with the leaves or waste product directly into the soil. Then some waste products are stored as resins and gums, especially in the xylem. So this is what happens in plants: transpiration, then in vacuoles, and then some are stored as gums in xylem, and also some are excreted out to the soil. So this is the excretion in plants.